We're taking a look back at the biggest political turning points, trends, and controversies as we hit rewind on Rising. We've got the power players, scandals, and outrageous decisions that have defined our conversations.
Some breaking and amazing news that just came across the wires, which is that Ghislaine Maxwell, who is Jeffrey Epstein's alleged madam, was just reportedly arrested by the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the FBI, and she will be charged. We do not yet know what the details of those charges are. However, as we've covered here time after time, Ryan, witness after witness, victim after victim has placed Ghislaine Maxwell at the center of the alleged human trafficking ring run by former pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This is a landmark moment, which honestly I didn't think was going to be coming. I thought she was going to get away scot-free. I read all of these reports about how she was in Israel, about how she was in Brazil, about how she was in California, hiding and shuttling around the globe in the homes of powerful people everywhere. And all I hope is that there is a camera on this woman's cell for the next 24 hours a day, every day, because she's supposed to be in court later this week. If she's held in the MCC, there better be a live stream about what's going on in that cell, because I'm not going to believe a word if anything happens to that woman while she's in custody.
Yeah. We're back, baby.
Yeah, we are. We're back. I mean,
the thing I want people to remember is that before Epstein died, it was reported that prosecutors had found in his safe CDs that said name of famous person, dates, and the names of the girls. And I say girls advisedly. We don't know what happened to those CDs.
Nope.
That the doesn't take many leaps to guess that that is the blackmail that everybody thought that he was acquiring through his wiring and recording of everything, the airplane, the mansion, the island, whatever. Keeping all these recordings. Who was he blackmailing? What is on those? And maybe this helps us get closer to figuring out actually what happened to him.
This is huge. And the reason why this matters is now it's all about to be in a court of law. That was the problem with Jeffrey Epstein dying, is it didn't come out in a court of prosecution. And all this stuff is just sitting in the Southern District of New York's office. I mean, I've been able to give the audience little glimpses about what's going on, right? So we had Alan Dershowitz, who files this claim in court and reveals that Virginia Giuffre, who is one of Prince Andrew's accusers, comes out and reveals in secret testimony that he had access to that she also accused former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak of once having been allegedly sexually involved with him. And we have photos of Ehud Barak going secretly into Jeffrey Epstein's mansion, neighbors of Jeffrey Epstein all saying that Ehud Barak used to stay at the mansion all the time. I mean, this thing goes all the way up to the top. What else have we covered here recently, which is that new Netflix documentary, Filthy Rich, of whom we had the filmmaker on, she interviewed one of the people who used to work as an IT contractor on Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island in the Virgin Islands, and once allegedly saw Bill Clinton just sitting there on the porch. No one is saying that he did anything. Nobody knows if he did anything, but Clinton denies ever even being on that island. And we also know that a lot of Epstein's most egregious pedophilic acts occurred on that island with, I think it was the Virgin Islands independent prosecutor put out a report saying that they had spoken to officials at the airport in that island that said that girls as young as 11 were seen departing Jeffrey Epstein's aircraft going to his residence.
Yeah, and a fairly recent book called A Convenient Death, The Mysterious Demise of Jeffrey Epstein, reported that Bill Clinton was not actually that close with Jeffrey Epstein, but according to this book, was having an affair with Maxwell.
Right.
And that's why he was close with, that's why he was seen around Epstein. Some people put that forward almost as a defense of Bill Clinton.
Is actually, he was trying to
Which, frankly,
I mean, makes sense.
That's better than the alternative.
Yeah, certainly.
So now if Maxwell, is forced to testify, Bill Clinton has strenuously denied this claim. She'll now be probably pressed under oath. Is this the case? What was Bill Clinton's involvement? Was it this or was it something else?
Remember, everybody, the list that I put out there of Alan Dershowitz, just of Virginia Giuffre, one victim that she put out about who she accused. Bill Richardson, governor of New Mexico, several hedge fund billionaires. I can't remember who his name. The Victoria's Secret person, the billionaire who Epstein actually, Leslie Wexner, who he allegedly stole all of his money from. I mean, I can go all the way down the line. The former prime minister of Israel, Ghislaine Maxwell, has all of that information in her head. We need to know everything that she knows, and it all needs to come out in open court so that we can learn about the blackmail, we can learn about her role in the sex trafficking ring, we can learn also there's a certain prince in the United Kingdom who I bet is freaking out right now because Prince Andrew reportedly had reached out to Ghislaine Maxwell about Virginia Giuffre, and whenever she came out and accused him there publicly in the UK, and he had that disastrous interview on the BBC, denied ever even knowing her. He said that the picture of him with his arm wrapped around her while she was a 17-year-old girl was doctored. That's how disastrous that it was. There are a lot of powerful people with a lot to lose about this arrest. It is it's a huge development in this case. And all we've ever wanted to see here is justice done for the victims. Yeah, it's a big deal.
And it's a real credit to their courage.
It is.
So many of them had their lives shattered, destroyed by the abuse that they were put through. They never gave up. It's a credit to journalists who kept pursuing this.
Julie Brown at the Miami Herald, who broke this whole story open.
The documentaries are probably helping. Documentaries now are getting people arrested all over the place.
Yeah.
But without the victims being willing to come forward, not just against a powerful man, but against perhaps the most powerful network of men in the entire world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to see this happen for them is at least some justice, but it's at the very early stages.
It's a small taste of justice, and if anything goes awry in this case, we will be all over it. I can promise you that. We'll have more Rising for you after this.
What's on your radar today, Kim?
Well, Elon Musk took to Twitter and asked the question many of us have been asking. How is it we still don't know who was on Jeffrey Epstein's client list? Here's his tweet. Only thing more remarkable than the DOJ not leaking the list is that no one in the media cares. Doesn't that seem odd? Well, I care, Elon, and it is odd. There are many leaks that happen each year, so why not this one? In fact, in 2017, Jeff Sessions revealed that the DOJ had 27 open leak investigations of classified information. We read about leaks happening fairly often, and it's usually information of public interest, like when James Comey leaked his notes from his meetings with Trump, or the recent SCOTUS leak regarding Roe v. Wade. Well, the public is pretty interested in Epstein's list, so why hasn't someone leaked it? Well, the DOJ might say there's just no such list of names to leak. They might claim Epstein didn't keep a detailed list and that figuring out who were his clients was a matter of piecing together bits of information from victim testimony, eyewitnesses, flight logs, and photographs. Unlike Heidi Fleiss, Epstein wasn't in the business of collecting money, so there's no need for him to keep a little black book or, in Fleiss's case, a 28-page red Gucci planner. But is that true? Maybe he wasn't collecting money, but perhaps he was collecting something like blackmail. And if he was collecting blackmail, like his victims claim and like many of us suspect, wouldn't the blackmail have been found by police or investigators? And if it was found, wouldn't there be a list of names from that found blackmail? And what about Ghislaine Maxwell? She was found guilty of several counts of sex trafficking and is scheduled to be sentenced later this month. You can't sex traffic without having people to sex traffic too. So certainly the DOJ has those names. So if the names exist, there's a list, or at least a file. And if a list or a file exists, why out of all of the leaks we hear about each year, hasn't this one leaked? Either the list doesn't exist, is being held by investigators and they're somehow able to keep a tight lid on some of the most sought after information of this decade, or something else happened. Now, podcaster Adam Davidson gives a little insight into maybe why we aren't hearing more names drop. In a Twitter thread, he writes, I spent 2 years working on the Jeffrey Epstein podcast, Broken. I became close with many of his victims and learned a lot of stuff that for annoying legal reasons we can't publish. He goes on to say, I knew that rich and powerful men can get away with a lot. I didn't realize just how much they can get away with and just how much the entire system, courts, journalism, prosecutor, works inadvertently and deliberately to reinforce their impunity. I think we all know that, say, Bill Gates and Clinton probably were up to no good. At the very best, they knowingly spent time and casted their halo on a man they knew was a serial rapist of children, though hard to believe it ended there. Yet they're given heroic treatment every week in the media, paying no price. Jeffrey Epstein is not some outlier, some freak who is now dead and best forgotten. He represents something essential in all of our systems of authority, law, courts, higher education, nonprofits, media, etc., that is there right now today. When I think of the unbelievably brave women like Virginia, like VRS Virginia, Pink Pepto-Bismol, and so many others who were dismissed, slut-shamed, etc., while cowards and evildoers were lauded, I feel like something deep is broken in the world we live in. I say all of this a few weeks before Ghislaine Maxwell is sentenced, and the world will likely put aside the Epstein story forever. Some weird set of crimes that two awful people committed. The bad guys won. They pulled it off. They raped children or sat by and watched others do so. They used their elite connections and access to power. The weird thing is, we all know what they did, and we don't seem to care. People maybe care. They just don't want to be ruined. In fact, Adam acknowledges his own risk in reply messages to others saying, there is a real likelihood that my life will be ruined. I could write a lot of stuff about a lot of people without worrying, but not these guys. So maybe there is a list to leak, and maybe someone inside the DOJ has tried to leak it. But maybe it's news organizations who won't publish it. With the amount of public interest in this case, and yet we still can't get any more names than the ones revealed by mostly Virginia Giuffre, this once again reiterates that in the entire Epstein saga, there seems to be a showcase of the powerful protecting the powerful. So what do you think? Brianna, I'm going to ask you this one because you're the lawyer here, so look, leaks happen all the time. I know that it's supposed to definitely not be leaked. It's not supposed to happen, but people definitely want to know who these names are. I mean, what do you think from like a legal perspective, what maybe is going on? Like, why are they at least not releasing the names legally, if not leaking them?
I'm sorry, but I can't help but draw a connection to the recent Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial and the threat of talking even in pretty vague terms about abuse that you're aware of, abuse that you perceive yourself to have endured in the past. To the point that you made about the podcaster who did a deep dive on this, he's spoken to victims. The stories are there. There are people, with evidence that is corroborated, at least in the public sphere, who are unwilling to come forward because if you cannot prove at a fairly high standard that these things happen, then you are subject to defamation claims. And even if you are ultimately not successful in those defamation claims, who has the money to spend defending those claims once they're actually leveraged? And that is why people have these concerns about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, because they are, again, an example of rich and powerful people who are able to use the system to kind of litigate their personal and private dispute in the court of public opinion because they have the means to do so. Whereas other people who are smaller, like these victims, who don't have the resources, are basically forced into silence. I think that's concerning.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brianna. I actually do. Go ahead,
Well,
Kim.
I just wanted to just mention that, so what's interesting about that is that there is then a possibility that the DOJ has this list and they have maybe released to some media people, these are the people we're investigating. I mean, I'm not sure really what they may or may not have said, but let's say if they did say this, then it's very possible that media organizations don't even want to touch it. That they say, we don't even want to go there. These people are too rich, too powerful, they're going to come after us legally. Like, as you mentioned, in Amber Heard's situation. And so we're not going to even begin to touch
Well, but
these.
in that case, I think they could, because they could just say the DOJ is investigating these people. That would be a fact, if it was a fact, without necessarily suggesting any of the underlying, because if you assert that the underlying accusations are true or there's some validity to them, then you could open yourself up to liability. But if you just said these are the people being investigated,
Right.
But not everybody investigated by the DOJ or the FBI or the government is guilty necessarily.
Well, there's also the threat of witness intimidation. I mean, we have Epstein, dying in captivity. I mean, there are all of these things when you're dealing with people at this scale of affluence, when you're talking about some of the richest people on the entire planet and most powerful and influential people, royal family, Bill Gates, people like this that are implicated. I think there's probably a legitimate concern from the DOJ that leaking these kinds of names could lead to interference with the trial that ultimately doesn't, help the interest of justice also.
I wonder if they're having some trouble with the victims, obviously young at the time of the alleged crimes, might have trouble recalling, who was who in various scenarios, or if they give conflicting, they say it one way and then actually it was like this, then that makes that there's a loss of confidence sometimes in investigators, and if that behavior is known by media people, that will really spook them, because then they think their risk of liability will be greater. So it could be something like that.
Yeah, it might not even be liability at all. I mean, they just might be afraid of other sorts of consequences. These people are very powerful. So it might not even boil down to, well, we're afraid of being sued. Yeah, you're right. You could maybe overcome that by, well, we just got this from the DOJ. This is factual. This is who they're investigating. But if that's not what you're afraid of, if you're not worried about them suing you, but you're afraid of them collapsing you, them ruining you, them coming, well, you ending up dead in a jail cell, like two people who are connected heavily to these crimes. You've got Epstein, obviously, who allegedly hung himself, and you have Jean-Luc Brunel, the modeling agent, who also allegedly hung himself and was found dead this past February in his jail cell. So you've got the guy who is potentially providing the girls, the models, and then you have Epstein, who we all know what he was doing, and they're both dead now. So this is, I mean, so I can understand
why
most people
in the media are afraid of. No, I think they're afraid of lawsuits more than dying, if that makes any sense. Certainly, their bosses, their editors, the people who have to sign off on certain decisions, and because sometimes because of how easy it can be, it's increasingly easy to really ensnare a person or an organization for just not getting every single thing exactly 100% right beyond any sort of doubt.
I don't know about that. I don't know if they're worried about lawsuits when it comes to this particular. I mean, yes, of course they're always worried about lawsuits, but I think it's something much bigger than that. I don't know if it's death necessarily that they're really truly worried about, but people like Jean-Luc Brunel and Epstein, they were very intimately involved in this entire scandal. It's beyond a scandal in these crimes. They were intimately involved. They knew who the girls were. They knew who the men were. They provided all of it. They facilitated it. So it's yes, they ended up dead, but other people would just end up ruined. And I think a lot of people are worried about, I think there's a lot of powerful people in this country that are much more worried about losing everything than a lawsuit.
Maybe I've covered, in my role as a journalist, I've covered some very salacious things, and in the times where I've been thwarted in reporting something I've really wanted to report, that's a salacious topic, it's always been because someone, an editor or a supervisor says, we think you're right, we're very confident, but we can't take the risk for liability, not for because they'll come after us, or not because anything like that. It's the liability. That's been what it's been in my case. I know a lot of journalists who operate that way. Obviously, this is it's slightly different scenario because people have actually died under sketchy circumstances, but that is really what holds a lot of journalists back generally.
Or maybe the boss is involved. I mean, after all, it was a very powerful list of people. So
everybody's involved. There's nobody not involved except for the three of us. So that's why we're so confused. All right. Thank you, Kim. We'll have more Rising right after this.
Hundreds of sealed court documents pertaining to late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein are set to be made public this week, and many prominent associates of Epstein's named in court, including Prince Andrew and former President Bill Clinton, will allegedly be revealed. Logs kept by one of Epstein's pilots showed Bill Clinton and his entourage flew extensively on Epstein's jet to international destinations in 2002 and 2003, but none of the available records so far prove Clinton made a trip to Epstein's island. Clinton was identified as John Doe 36 among the 170 names expected to be revealed in the files. John Doe 36 is mentioned more than 50 times in the filings, per the Washington Times.
Well, former Fox News host Tucker Carlson is set to interview Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, about his inability to see the hospital records from the night his brother died in prison. Let's watch.
As of right now, you're telling me you can't find the PCR report?
Not for the 10th of August, 2019, no. It's not in the fire department database. I don't know why. If it's supposed to be there, we'll find out. But first you got to get the letters of administration before you can take them anywhere.
Yeah, you see, because the date on here is the 10th of 19. That's the day they found him, they took him, and he was dead.
Well, then they might have taken him directly to the morgue. So
No, he was in the hospital. I have photographs of him in the hospital too.
just because you see the fire department personnel there, that doesn't mean they provided documentation. It could have
They
been someone
told
else.
me they did. I spoke to them.
Yeah.
And they were the ones who suggested I get the PCR reports.
Well, they're saying one thing, but the computer is saying something else.
I understand the stakes are much higher, obviously, but listening to that doesn't that sound like every interaction you have with bureaucrats at the DMV or anything where you got told one thing, but it's different in the computer and it's different this way, which is not to suggest that there isn't anything nefarious going on there, but also that that's the general experience most people have when dealing with officials in that position.
I mean, sure, but it's also true that oftentimes the kind of administrative failures or ambiguity are used to cover up legitimate failures of these institutions, which are tasked with keeping records for exactly these kinds of instances. And I do, you know, if you have a very high-profile client subject like Jeffrey Epstein was, I don't think it's conspiratorial to ask questions about why someone who should have had the most eyes on him and the most security and who should have had the best, most secure paperwork and all of the I's dotted and T's crossed have so many failures that have compounded on each other when there's so many very famous and very rich people implicated in finding out more about his schemes.
It's the old maliciousness versus incompetence kind of
yes, well, there's only so much
debate.
Incompetence that I think can be credibly excused, and I think that's part
where
of
we
why.
might disagree.
Well,
We're talking about government employees here. And the police.
I think a lot of what is described as government and police incompetence actually is maliciousness. So the question here is whether or not there's going to be anything newly revealing about what's come out. As we've already discussed, it is known that people like Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew were implicated through other court filings from other flight logs that have already been revealed. The question is whether or not these approximately 50 other mentions of Bill Clinton in the documents gives some additional color as to what his relationship was with Epstein. Now, Bill Clinton has said that he never visited the famous island, Little St. James. Virginia Giuffre said differently that he had visited the island. It would be interesting to see if any of these additional records cast any light on the truthfulness of their conflicting reports.
Maybe she saw the painting and it was so lifelike she thought it was actually Bill Clinton.
Remember? Painting?
There's this so there was a painting of Bill Clinton as a woman on the island in Jeffrey Epstein's residence. Google it; it'll come up. I'll show it to you after.
There's a picture of Bill Clinton as a woman.
A painting, a work of art of Bill Clinton.
Commissioned by who? It was
Jeffrey Epstein had it commissioned, I believe. Yeah, in the residence. So he was able to get Bill Clinton on the phone.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, it's Bill Clinton in a blue off-the-shoulder dress with red heels on.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Jeffrey Epstein was able to get Bill Clinton on the phone very easily. So his associations with Clinton are very well established. I think what would be interesting is to finally learn, frankly, some other names, or learn if there was more, just the casual involved, people like, I'm not picking on him to name it, like Noam Chomsky, who had some kind of limited legal interaction with Epstein having to do with his will or something like that. How many people like that are there, and are any of those people actually on the plane or actually visiting the island or are involved? Is the government of the Virgin Islands? That would be most interesting. We know, for instance, that Stacey Plaskett sought out Epstein specifically as a donor to her campaign, the delegate of the Virgin Islands. We know that he tried to have the sex offender laws of the Virgin Islands rewritten so he would be less ensnared. I'd like to know about some of those connections, particularly from the period after he was already a known sex offender, had already been convicted, a period in which his associations with figures like Bill Gates were still quite ongoing. His associations with Bank of America figures still very ongoing. And that's the really damning period. Obviously, the involvement with Bill Clinton from much earlier is interesting and is of public note, but is somewhat well documented already.
Yeah, in some ways, we already know what is so scandalous about this, which is that Jeffrey Epstein politics aside, was very close to Donald Trump. He was close to Bill Clinton. He was close to all of these extremely affluent and powerful people, Bill Gates. And the scandal really does seem to be less about the specifics of it, but the fact that this was a man who was notorious for certain behaviors even before his conviction, in the rumor mill, which did not cause anybody to object to spending time with him. Those rumors were confirmed around 2008, 2009, around his first conviction, and that still didn't keep many people from freely associating with him in public, inviting them to weddings, cavorting around, doing all those sorts of things. Ghislaine Maxwell being at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, for instance. So, in some ways, I think that these additional stories about more reveal almost gives the impression that there's not enough here to be really condemnatory of right off the bat, and for us to ask really serious questions about why there's this elite sector of our society that seems to have no consequences for engaging in some of the most illegal and prurient behavior known to man.
Right.
We'd also be remiss not to mention that flight logs reveal that former President Donald Trump also allegedly took at least 7 trips on Epstein's private plane between 1993 and 1997. Back in 2002, Trump allegedly said Epstein was a lot of fun to be with.
Donald Trump in 2002 said of Epstein, he's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side.
Yeah, and I see a lot of, frankly, people online who are very, release the Epstein client list, very obsessed with supposedly getting to the bottom of the Epstein issue, totally covering for Trump on this when it's clear he had at least some casual association, perhaps more limited than some other figures. But it goes to show you that Jeffrey Epstein's game was not partisan, was simply attaching himself to powerful people, to worming his way into their lives by offering these. He was extremely wealthy, by offering the plane rides and the invitations to his island, where these much more horrific crimes were going on. And I think people want to know what was the level of involvement of some of these very powerful figures. Is there some? I don't know that it will ever be as simple as, here's a list of the people Jeffrey Epstein provided underage girls to, and here's the list of people who had sex with them. People, if there is such a list, want to see it and want those people to go to jail, not just Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
And that is why the circumstances of his death are under so much scrutiny, because in lieu of that list, there was only Jeffrey Epstein's testimony, which we will obviously never get now.
More Rising right after this.